In class, we watched a documentary called Children of Alcoholics. This is a subject matter that strikes somewhat close to home for my family, as my grandfather was an alcoholic. So I have decided to do an interview with my mother, the child of an alcoholic. Mom? So the first question, when did your father's drinking problem start?
Well, before I was born, but then I was a very late baby for him because my dad was 49 when I was born. So I don't know if it started in World War II when a lot of people did a lot of drinking, or if it started before that in the, 20s, 30s, and 40s, because my father was born in 1902. So as far as I know, he always had a drinking problem.
How often did he drink?
My dad was what you would call a binge drinker. So he would go for long periods of time without drinking at all, and then he'd go on a bender and he would drink for many days in a row, miss work even because of his drinking, especially the older he got.
What was life like at home when your father was drinking?
Wasn't great. I probably bonded extra close with my mother because of it. It was just something that you did not want to be a part of, because Dad would just drink and drink and drink and drink. I'm sure he would have been dead earlier, but he was mostly a beer drinker, so he didn't die of alcohol poisoning kind of thing. He'd run out of beer and he would phone the taxi to go to the liquor store to pick him up a couple of cases of beer and bring it to him. So what was things like at home? It was like our own little world. But for me, living in that, as I got older, I envisioned, I built mentally a brick wall. And the brick wall was a division between my life at home and my life in the real world. So when I'd leave the house in the morning, and close the door, I was on the other side of the brick wall, and I didn't think about it. So my life was normal outside the brick wall, so that I had, normal life. I didn't let it interfere. I didn't let it bother me. I just didn't let it touch me. And then it didn't come back in until, I went back in the house. Dad wasn't abusive or anything like that. It was just, it just wasn't nice. When somebody's an alcoholic and they're drinking and drinking and drinking, there's this disgusting smell. If I'm walking down the street and somebody walks by me and they're an alcoholic, I smell it, and it's just a gross smell. There was that smell, and as a kid, you don't want to see your father staggering out of the bedroom in his long johns with the flap hanging down off the back, and staggering to the bathroom. It wasn't a home that you want to be going home to. Not that my parents didn't love me. I was never abused. There was never any issue, and Mom was a rock. So.
How did you deal or cope with your father when he was drinking? Which, kind of by building the brick wall, then, I suppose.
Yeah, I would get out of the house as much as I could, so that I wasn't around it. And so it made things awkward when you're a kid growing up, because you can't invite your friends over, because you can't have your friends come in and see that kind of an environment. When he wasn't drinking, things were fine, but the older he got, the more he drank, and the longer the drinking spells would be, So I coped with it by shutting it out, by getting away from it as much as I was able to. Um, it sounds, I wouldn't wish it on anybody else, but it's kind of a shame I didn't have brothers or sisters at being an only child, because when you're there alone, you know, you'd go in your room and read a book and get away from it. I just be away from it as much as I was able to, and Mom and I were real close. One really strong memory of, I don't know how old I was, maybe 12. I was still fairly young, and Mom just couldn't stand it anymore. And so she told me not to get undressed when I went to bed, that she and I were going to go out just to get away from it. And so I remember going to bed with my clothes on and pulling them up here and just being afraid my dad was going to come in and find out. And like, not that he ever came in my bedroom, but you're worried about that. And then when he was asleep, we kind of tippy-toed down to the basement to the car and kind of coasted the car out of the garage and down the driveway, and then started it up when we were on the road, and we went and visited some people, and people that we'd never visited before. They had a girl who was in my grade at school. She wasn't one of my regular friends. We just went and visited with these people, and we sat around the dining room table and played Scrabble that night. And that's the, time when I'm aware, like my mom just, having had it up to there.
How did it affect his relationship with your mom?
Hugely. I don't think that they had a normal or a proper marriage. He loved her with all of his heart, and me too. But remember, my dad was 49 when I was born. He didn't expect that he'd ever have a child, or for that matter, ever be married. And so he just had. That's what I couldn't understand. He had everything that was his heart's desire with his home and his family, and yet he still couldn't stop drinking. Mom would she'd try and find other interests, again, going out, other interests in terms of when I was a teenager. We were the good kids. We didn't drink. We went square dancing, and the square dancing community that we belonged to ranged from us as teenagers up to grandparents. And so I'd been square dancing for well over a year or something, and Mom decided that she was going to learn, and she started going to square dancing, so she was having that outlet. And she did have good friends that, that she could visit with, and who knew and understood, and people were certainly aware of my dad's drinking problem. I know there was one friends of theirs, and he would, knew that there was problems at home, and he propositioned her, and no, she wasn't having any part of that. So she didn't escape by having an affair or anything like that. She was loyal to my dad, but she got to the point where she just couldn't take it anymore. And when I went, she left to go to university, and she separated from him. So.
Did you know any other children of alcoholics?
I mean, kids that I grew up with that I was aware, no, I didn't. The only one that I was aware of, and it was not from the kid, it was from the parent. One time my dad he was trying to stop, and he was having the DTs, and he was seeing spiders crawling up the walls, and stuff. And Mom called AA, and one of the AA members came over to talk to my dad, and that he was the father of somebody that I knew, but so that I knew her father was an alcoholic, but he was obviously a recovered alcoholic. But no, I didn't know of anybody. So either it was something that everybody kept quiet and private, or in those days, I don't know. I wasn't aware of broken families or drinking issues or any of that kind of stuff.
Did you have anyone that you could talk to or go to at that time to help you deal with it?
No, just Mom. And I didn't talk about it. I used that brick wall, to deal with it. I tried to make my life as good as I could. And I loved my dad, and I wanted him to be proud of me, and he was so old world Scottish that the only time when he said he loved me or showed me real affection was when he was drunk. When he was sober, he was a very strict parent. So I would come home and show him my report card. And Dad, I got 4 A's or something, and he'd, I'd get a little smile, and he'd say, well, I expect you to do as well next time. Not congratulations, not well done. Keep it up, do as well. That would be his thing. And then one of those people that were friends of ours that I mentioned earlier that Mom could visit, Dr. and Mrs. Francis, he was a retired doctor. He would tell me, because he thought I needed to know how much my dad loved me and how proud he was of me. He would tell me how my dad would brag about me to people, and how he would, oh God, Don's going to be talking about Sandy again, kind of thing. That he would talk me up, and he was proud as hell of me and how well I was doing. But all I got was, keep it up kind of thing.
How has your father's alcoholism affected your life and views after childhood?
I think that children of alcoholics go one way or the other. Children of alcoholics are susceptible to being alcoholics themselves. And I think so that's the one side of the pendulum. And I think that either they become alcoholics or they swing to the other side of the pendulum. And I don't mean they're necessarily teetotalers, because I'm not a teetotaler. I do drink alcohol, but you know how very little alcohol I drink. I don't drink hardly at all. I drink very, very little. And maybe some children of alcoholics are teetotalers, and I guess I'm as close to a teetotaler as being a not teetotaler can be, really. And the other thing that it affected me because of the heredity is I was very afraid for you kids, because teenagers just going out and drinking when you're a teenager, 15, 16, 17, you can become an alcoholic within 6 months because it affects you and it can ruin your life. And kids are in rebel stage and do their own thing, and now we're going out to a party and having some, and that just scared me for you kids to get through those teen years without having that affect you, because my dad was an alcoholic, and your grandfather on the other side, he was not an alcoholic, but he came from a family of alcoholics, and he had a real drinking problem himself during the war. So I thought, okay, well, there's in the history, so it made me afraid for you guys.
That's all the questions that I had. Thank you very much for being so honest.
You're welcome.